Today we're going to the Polish, Prussian, Bohemian, Austrian, Prussian, then Polish town of Glatz. It existed as early as the 10th century and saw its first German settlers here about the year 1250. It was besieged several times during the 30-Year War due to its key strategic location, and during the 7-Year War it was taken by the Austrian army from the Prussians, who had gained it in 1742 after a siege. During the War of Austrian Succession, the city, together with its stronghold fortress, was conquered by Prussia under Frederick II. The city itself surrendered on January 14th. However, the fortress, with its 2,000 soldiers, held out until April 25th, when starvation made further resistance impossible. Thereafter, the Prussians began expanding the fortresses. I say plural because they built another, only for the fortress to see battle again in 1760. Having lost it again and regained it in 1762, they would continue to upgrade the fortress until 1807, when it was captured by the French army supported by Bavarian troops, whereafter it would become a prison. During the Second World War, the fortress housed a German prison administered by the Reich Ministry of Justice and by the Wehrmacht. It housed prisoners of various nationalities, including Allied prisoners of war. The main fortress also housed a sub-camp of Groß-Rosen, where they ran a small factory which manufactured electronic components for U-boats and V-1 and V-2 missiles during the latter part of World War II for AEG. The main fortress overlooking the town is an amazing fortress, with some of the largest crownworks and ravelines I've ever seen. It houses extensive tunnels and counter-mining tunnels for miles underground. Now, one would think it impenetrable. However, in 1760, when the Austrian army laid siege to the fort, it surrendered after only 5 days. Now, it must be said, it was only defended by Italian deserters and reservists. This, however, took place near the absolute low point of the war, where Frederick and his manpower nearly exhausted following a string of defeats. Yet, he did manage to win the war eventually and regain back the fortress in 1762. Still strange, since after the Prussians took the fortress initially in 1741-42, they realized the importance of the location, and they began to upgrade. They saw, however, also the large fortress vulnerable, needing its back protected as well. So, from 1743, the top Prussian fortress engineer, Major General Gerhard Cornelius Wallrave, began constructing a star fort on the hill opposing this fort, on the hill of Scharfberg, on the right bank of the Neisse River. The whole work lasted 19 years and brought the result in form of a strong star fortress, completely securing the approaches to the main fort from the east side and blocking the valley of the Neisse. Still, when the 7-Year War began, the fort was not yet quite completely done as intended, leaving a maze of tunnels under the fortress coat yet incomplete. And despite of all of this, the fortress would fall to the Austrians a few years later, in a few days. But, like I said, it was not manned quite well. We will, however, get back to the larger fortress in future episodes, because it is insanely impressive. But for now, let's turn our attention to the smaller store forts here across the water. Here it lies, overgrown and mostly forgotten. The firing ports and tunnels are open, while many others have collapsed. Fort Scharfberg consisted of 2 large crowns, the low crown and the high crown. The high crown, upon which a building made of casemates equipped with earthen forefoot, with traverses. The front bastion of the crown, with scopes, were equipped with covered descents to the dry moat. It had fortifications in the form of a redoubt, a keep, which was shielded from the forehead, was crowned with an earthly cart. In the neck, the fort had a neck barracks, which were located in a two-on building, the Red Barracks, with a special element, a partially contaminated neck capon, whose task it was to cover the upper gate and the entrance from the Breslau road, and supply the fort with water, as therein was one of the wells. There was a second well placed on the left shoulder of the low crown bastion, which during the siege exposed it to rapid destruction by artillery fire. After 1762, further reinforcements and additions were gradually made, and in 1802 an additional barracks building, the White Barracks, and a two-level battery with a shelter were constructed. Most of the fortifications were built of broken stone, partly from brick. In architectural terms, it is a military style, raw and completely devoid of any decorations. In the preserved fragments of the fort, only the poor stone portals, windows, bands, and corner are visible.
So we are here to visit a star fort that, well, on one hand has been abandoned. There's all the stuff that's hiding in the woods. That's what we're really going to look at. And there is the real big fort in the area. And they were here to be mutually supporting and defending. Although in the late 1700s, the cannons from there couldn't reach here and vice versa. So they needed them from both sides to button up the roads, the rivers here between them.
The fort built here had the outline of a distorted six-pointed star with a bastion attached to the southwest. Here both forts could support each other, with gunfire blocking enemy forces from advancing to the other. Also, a lock over the river was built in 1751, making it possible to flood the approach area.
Nice dry moat or ditch here on one of the stars. Of course, this is the smallest star fort, and there was the big barracks buildings were only built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But this all started being a Prussian fort. We got to get over there and get in there. This is actually rather large. There are the ditch rounds, because here they would fire a grape shot that could then ricochet without destroying the wall, although it does look a little bit like the wall is destroyed at that very place where a shot could have impacted. Star forts are really special. There's a deer. Don't know why every time there's a fort somewhere, there's a shooting range nearby. Must be a quinkydink. Now somewhere there's a bridge or way over, and for me that tree is not it. So I'm gonna circle the star fort here, and then I'll find my way in. It almost looks like some damage has been done to these, but it could also be decay. I mean, remember, these were initiated by Frederick II. So there's age to them. The fort was commissioned by Frederick II, and it was built in a French design or French style. Shall we say, a builder that was inspired by the French fortress designs, which means you sort of can see a little bit of Vauban here, although you will not have a whole lot of crenellations and ornamentations in this. It's very militaristic, Prussian, German, efficient, without a whole lot of dilly-dally. That is the new official fortress term. There's no dilly-dally. God, I'm going to be a cranky old guy one day. All the stores are generally the same. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. How do you make deer sounds? There's the ditch. And you'll see in different types of stone. Almost French inspired. Geez. Wonder where they got that idea. There's the other side of the ditch. And here's the ditch leading to surrounding the store. Just gonna go for a little walk here in the ditch to see if there's a way into the fort from this direction. There may not be. I could imagine some of this may have been sealed up. Just basing that on imagination. Otherwise, I'll see if I can crawl through one of the gun ports. Which, unless I lose a whole lot of weight real quick, does not look like it's a viable option. I see the firing fields here in the ditch, and the corners and the star, and then the big cannons here. There would have been a cannon that would fire grape shot, because this is only 150 meters. Just like this. You really don't want to be in here if anything's firing at you. There's nowhere for you to go. That's the whole point. That was the point of these forts of this era, and the one before, and the one after. What have we there? An open window. I think I may actually be skinny enough to get into these. Let's give that a shot, shall we? This is the view from the gun position in here. Here are this remains of metal bracers here, cement here. I can't tell you anything about that. I know the main fort was used as a prison. It's possible this was as well. A firing port for a rifle here by the side. And now, of course, I could just have walked around and through the door instead of crawled through the window. But what's the fun in that? Don't you just love when people do that? That means I'm going this way. Also means I may not be in the actual fort, but in... Well, there's not a caponnier here. There's a caponnier, but this is not it. Son of a donkey. Huh. And there used to be ventilation grooves up here. So, different ditch. I honestly don't know which direction to go, so I'm just going to pick one. I know there's also counter mining tunnels, which may actually be what I'm looking at there. They dug these in advance of an enemy showing up for obvious reasons. Because, sortie port maybe? A lot of this territory here is rock, so you want to prepare your counter-mining tunnels, because if you don't, it takes time and effort to build them. If you only start when the enemy shows up, well, it's going to be you may not make it before he gets in. Oh, this is nice and chilly down here. Also, by the way, the counter-mining tunnels are really short and okay covered up here, so some of these were only begun. They're not actually completed, but there is a network of tunnels emanating here from the front crown works or under them. That was not it. Some of them were longer, some of them had not really been completed. But they just begun them. Some damage really was done here. I wonder why. There was some mention about destruction that was commenced but not completed. Alright. Well, this should lead me into the fort proper. Oh, what do we have there? Hang on. Hang on.
Here there were also countermines extensively begun and prepared. Some of the T-shaped endings would have eventually turned into some of these countermining tunnels that was not quite begun but laid out, and of course defended as well.
Oh. So this is one of the defenses. That is defending the ditch here. So there are two ditches, and then there's a little tunnel in the outer wall. So this is one of the corner star defensive positions. I say corner star, you know what I mean. It's a star. There's corners everywhere. Anyway, moving on. Almost like a little Caponia here. I just had to look because I thought I saw a little tunnel. See, there's sometimes you have these tunnels that have been begun and then just prepped, but not actually dug in. And you have here plenty of ventilation. If you start finding cannons in here, you need this to ventilate. And the Prussians were very good at natural ventilation. Airflow, water flow in tunnels. They had dedicated miners in the Prussian army and dedicated miners to do these tunnels. Alright, let's see what's get into the fort. I'm imagining we can see an ungodly amount of counter-scarp positions out here. So this should be the interior of the fort. And here's a staircase. Looks like there's a well without a staircase, but let's just go with that. Here was the well. Of course there had to be a well, but this well is out in the open, not protected or inside the fort itself. I was a little surprised. Crew shelter, powder store for gun crews, just as long as there's an entrance that takes me all the way in somewhere. Although it's not like here is a deep centered fort underground like we would see 100 years later. So it's not exactly fair that I'm looking for a fort interior, because there really wasn't one as such. And our staircases. All right. Now we are inside the fortress proper, and I see artillery positions. Lots of dirt mounds. Don't know where to go. Luxury. So, I think cannon position here, the star here, and if I didn't know any better, I would say that a heavy shell took out a good chunk of this. Seriously, how is this not a bomb impact? Huh. So, in here, there's a little shelter that will lead me back out into the ditch. I'm imagining. There's no staircase at dirt road. I'll traverse that like a geriatric bunny. I'm just gonna come down here. We'll see what's here. Yeah. This is going to take me back out to the ditch. I want to go back into the ditch, so we're going to turn around. Yeah, back out to the ditch here. And seriously, how is that not a bomb crater? On what planet is it not? What have we here? Alright, sometimes I should just go outside. This must have been an explosion. Somebody must have dropped some aerial ordnance on this place. This is... I don't know what this is. Glorious thing. Let's just face it, we're discovering this together, because I really don't know. Okay, I do know. This is another little position that will split up into 4 gun positions. Yep. 4 gun positions. Again there, protecting the ditch from the outside. So there's 2 ditches or 2 moats, dry moats. That one behind me protects the first one, and in here is the second, which is protected by, well, I don't see anything yet, but we're going in there because that's the interior of the fort. So if there's any remaining structures, they're in here. So, see you up topside. Okay, so all right, we'll take this one because it looks the least hospitable. Yeah, actually. Okay, now having brushed the spiders out of my eyes, there's another ditch. And here's another powder store. Cannon store. Probably for the cannon. I roll the cannons in here to be in shelter. Possibly the crews would live with them because there's good ventilation here. Ventilation in the walls. So ventilation in the walls quite a bit. I think this probably was a powder store then. I haven't really seen any yet, so it makes sense there would have to be some powder stores considering it's an artillery fort. Glorious thing about this place is don't know where I am and I don't know what this is. So I'll go this way. Maybe. Maybe. Well, hell, it's as good as a guess as any, really. It is a hot day. Artillery ramp. Built up with stone. Stone wall. I'm gonna go down here. They would have to have ramps to roll the cannons up in the first place. Almost looks like there's destruction that has taken place in some way. The rubble's got to come from somewhere, you know. It looks like an old battlefield, which is good because it's kind of the name of the channel, really, but it looks like something happened here, but I haven't found any documentation of anything here yet. Battles, wars, destruction, this shouldn't really have been. These were obsolete both for World War I and World War II. Kind of want to go down here. These are firing ports that are closed up here. Lots of bars on the windows here. They could have been used for the prison as well. Set from the mid 1800s, late 1800s. It was well agreed that the fortress was obsolete and they started using it as a prison. including at a time that was so poor for this area that was Prussian, incidentally, that they used the prisoners to beg for money for the city. This has been closed up here at my left. Fine ports. It looks like very old. It looks like an old castle. It's actually quite pretty. Let's see how smaller stones in the embankment than the flat ones to hold it. Oh, that's what I was looking for. An open door. What a beautiful place. And so quiet too, except for the bees.
And I was correct initially when I was on the ground. The fort was used as a prison in later years, and possibly also during the Second World War.
Let's see. It was in here, if we can even get in. It could be a tower. It's an out. Oh. Cannon ramp, there's got to be an artillery ramp. That's different. I'm curious. This I've seen as ventilation for munition store for a powder magazine. Got metal attachments here and a beam sitting up there. Very interesting. Even a little bit of tar squeezing out through the cracks there. Weatherproofing. And if I go up the dirt ramp here, I will get to exactly what I thought I'd see. Artillery positions. You can still see the dirt mounds. Artillery positions everywhere. Powder magazine, I'm hoping. This is what I mean. You don't have a centralized underground fort. You have bastions with powder magazines and crew shelters, cannon garages. This has collapsed. Looks like a powder store that has collapsed or suffered catastrophic existential foundational crisis. Decided to no longer exist for some reason. Artillery position it would serve would be here. Guessing there's more. So, if I continue a little further, here is a powder store that I started with. Right. Okay. So I came in some sort of a full circle type thing. Alright, I'm back here. Having circled the battlefield. These really look like brushed cement firing positions. And they're guarding what used to be a hole here before this side of the building came down, because the cannon would roll through here up the ramp on the other side of that stone. But here's a hint. Here used to be a building. There used to be a building. Guessing a powder store here. Steel beams up there that held the loft of this and then the dirt on top. So the reinforcement ideas, the concept was there. Somebody's using this, it's fine. I think I am embarking on a walk down the ditch now. Possibly. Bathroom. This is where you need to wear long sleeve shirts. So what have we there? So there's something on top of that building. Alright, we'll go up there. See what's in here first. Huh. I like that. Troubles me that it's full of toilet paper, but let's not, well, slip and fall, shall we? Here we go. Here's the fighting position I wanted to see. So from one ditch goes the soldiers to the fighting position. That's overlooking the ditch. Of course, plenty of ventilation in the roof. Remember, muskets, black powder cannons, not very forgiving when it comes to the smoke inhalation part. And we were walking out there. I used to the defenses of the this side of the store. Brilliant. But again, you see, this is not a central fort that spreads out from one place to all of them. You actually, for the soldiers, they would have to get out to get into their fighting positions from their casernes, from their central barracks, from where they were. They would have to go here to fight. There wasn't tunnels all the way underground leading like a spider web to the positions. It was a completely different type of setup.
There were gunpowder stores and workshops in the buildings in the center. Here bullets, shells were made and filled by specialist artillerymen. Unfortunately, only one of these buildings have survived and is currently rented out to a small local business.
Well, somebody's using these. What a shame, they're locked. What is that thing? Looks like a large caserne in here. Somebody put the name on that. What a shame. What have we here then? We have a very large tank. And then we have what used to be the bathrooms. This is where the bathrooms used to be, or the washrooms maybe, even. I wonder what war brought that tank here, and why. I wasn't put here just for fun. Now, it must be said that star forts are complicated to navigate, especially when they're overgrown. Does not make it any easier. And then, without a specific plan, trying to find out what was what, well, see aforementioned comment. So, I think there's a building in there. Saw a tunnel under me somewhere. Dirt mound. We're on the back side to some degree. Here's a large dirt mound. Usually denotes something being in it. There's a deer. Lots of animals running around out here. And here is, holy crap, an underground. So, not the place we want deer to fall into, for me. See if this turns into a staircase. I'll have to be creative. Come on now, really? Really? That's not helping. There's a lot of missing parts and pieces. On the other side of the hole is another hole. So let's see if this is not the right one. That will lead me. I'm getting air coming through. Wow, this really is collapsing. Holy crap on a stick. Alright, let's just walk very nice and quietly here. And count on not having anything fall on my head. Shit, this whole place is coming down. Alright, well, brilliant, brilliant. Yeah. Well, what is this? I mean, anybody? I would say well, but there's no well. Built rather unevenly. Actually, it's almost built as if it's built in waves. But what is it? I ask myself. I am intrigued. This thing's just hanging by a root. These are the newer barracks that was constructed later and have now been reconstructed for business. And here's the ditch.
The barracks, which were constructed last, had seen some demolition in the 19th century. However, this was halted, as you can see today. And today a local group are restoring these to rent out to local businesses. And so far I will say they have done so quite tastefully.
That looks nice. That is probably what it would have looked like when it was a barracks. So having open little businesses in there in that way, I'm totally good with. It's a nice restoration they did. Let's just be honest here. It's being refurbished into businesses in the barracks, and then there's all the stuff that's hiding in the woods. That's what we're really gonna look at, because I really don't exactly know what to expect. But these are the old barracks. Two-story barracks. There would be an upper floor here. These are not exactly in good shape. Walkway between the floors. This is actually the first place I see there is the floor in place. A little bit of metal rebar hanging over the pillars. I thought this was just going to be a wooden floor suspended in the groove and on those pillars. But this was a real barracks with ventilation. Trust the Prussians to have ventilation in the walls, as you would see here. Fabulous. So, okay. Prussian fortress, built mid-1800s. This is the Star Fort that was built opposing fortress of Glatz. Because, well, there's a river in between, and you need a fort on both sides of the river to protect the city, don't you? I would imagine this has been reworked and been refurbished and be reused for things for many years. So I'm imagining there might be some newer additions. Here the floor is made in brick with a little bit of metal sticking through the bricks. That's different. So what have we here? The center of this star. I haven't even discerned where the stars are yet, because this is rather big, and I haven't found the positions yet either, although I know they're here somewhere. So what have we got in here? We have a room that's blocked up. Well, honestly, I'd expected more, but here's the firing position. So there's that. this does look like some sort of battle damage or damage. Certainly the whole facade have caved in, and that usually doesn't happen for no reason. And here they're probably preparing to open up little businesses. Again, that is brilliant because you get a chance to preserve the old buildings here. And I will say they have done the barracks in a very nice style for the businesses here. It looks authentic, it looks proper. It's not gaudy or what you could imagine. Again, barrack room with the second floor. I'm expecting there to be, if this was the center, there would be, this is the outside of here that's collapsed, and I would have thought there would be a caponnier or something. Could also put in the window with the ventilation back there. I don't really know what is what. I'm very curious.
Now, I am continuously curious how such an amazing fortress complex could be lost in only 5 days, regardless of how bad the soldiers who manned it were. Both the terrain and the layout lends itself extremely well to defense, so I have to take into account the weakened state of the Prussian military as partially responsible for this. Also, interestingly enough, one of the drawings from 1760 does not even mark this small star fort. However, while others does, including it outlines the initial Austrian force dispositions. Exploring old lost star forts is amazing, but you better wait, because next time I have to show you many more of them, and many of them are larger and far more elaborate and extensive, and we will get back to the main fort in town, because that is something for a special episode, and it's going to be a long one. This is the hospital. There is a hospital here for 60 beds. And that's not entirely unusual for the time. What makes the Prussian military unusual is that if they were wounded or lost limbs, that didn't mean they were out of a job and sitting at home on the poorhouse begging for money like in many other countries. If a Prussian soldier lost a limb, well, they would give him a different job. AG was producing parts for V1s and V2s with conscripted labor from Ukraine, Russia, Poland, and They would live here and work here. It was not bombed or destroyed. Interestingly enough, they should have certainly put it on the bombing target list for the Allies, but it didn't. And thus, the fortress survived. The old gun position here been changed. Before the Second World War, there was a prison here for the bars. One of the really impressive things about large forts like this is all the walkways, all the defensive tunnels, the moats, the ditches. They're everywhere. And if you are an attacking infantry and you run your way into this, you actually manage to penetrate the outer defenses. Well, now you're running around in here where people are shooting at you from every which way defense direction you can think of, and you have no idea where to go. The work it takes to restore these works. Again, one of the tunnels into one of the crown works. No idea where it leads. I'm just gonna follow the light and see where I come out. Almost looks like there's an out here. With ventilation right above.
My name is Tino Struckman. I run Lost Battlefields. Every year, I travel around the world to try to bring you to all the most interesting historical military locations from modern wars and the World War II special projects, battlefields, forts, fortresses, and tunnels, everything else. Things you may not be able to see or go to yourselves. Please join me on Patreon or join Lost Battlefields through the website so you get access to all my files and my notes. It really does help, and like, follow, share here on the channel if you can. That helps too.